Welcome to the webinar, Healthy Neighborhoods for Healthy Cities, hosted by 880 Cities. My name is Amanda O'Rourke, and I am the Executive Director of 880 Cities. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues, Shannon Lawrence and Brandon Miles. We also have a panel of fantastic partners we've worked with this past year, who you will hear from later on in the agenda. For those who are not familiar with 880 Cities, we are a nonprofit organization based in Toronto, which is located on Treaty 13 territory. Our mission is to ignite action and challenge the status quo to create healthier, more equitable, and sustainable cities. Over the last 17 years, we have been challenging cities by asking a simple but we think powerful question. What if everything we did in our cities was great for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old? We believe if you start there, you can create better cities for all. The 880 concept is not solely about creating age-friendly cities, but also about creating a city or town that works for everyone. We understand that age, while a universal human experience, is just one dimension of how people in cities experience inequity. We recognize the multiple ways in which marginalization and oppression intersect depending on one's social location. Your race, your gender expression, your ethnocultural background, your income, all of this has an impact on how one navigates public space and city building processes. Today, our goal is, we have an action-packed agenda. Our goals for today are to learn about the key elements of creating healthier, more equitable and sustainable neighborhoods for people of all ages and backgrounds. Also to learn about equity-driven and data-supported strategies that put neighborhoods at the center of city development. Also about how creative partnerships can quickly move ideas to action and drive transformative impact. And last but not least, how 880 Cities partners in Mississauga, Kitchener, and Brampton have successfully implemented neighborhood placemaking projects that support health equity, local economic development, and advance climate goals. So about neighborhoods, we know that neighborhoods shape our health and well-being, but just how much do they shape them? We know that postal code determines our health just as much and maybe more than our genetic code. And this is not just our opinion. This is a message and statement endorsed by Canada's top doctors and health researchers. Our neighborhoods impact whether you have access to healthy food, places to exercise, or health services when needed. Your neighborhood also affects your personal and family's economic prosperity, the availability of jobs, unemployment rates, education and training opportunities. These social factors shape and determine health and longevity across the lifespan, which is why we're so interested in neighborhoods. We also know that neighborhoods, built and social environments, the importance of them became even more evident during the pandemic, which further demonstrated that both health and social conditions are inequitably distributed in cities, that these inequities are detrimental to 880's mandate to build social, healthy places that foster inclusion, and that these inequities can be measured and modified. We can change this. The pandemic also highlighted the resilience that is found in neighborhoods and at the neighborhood scale in communities through the organization of vaccination clinics, food distribution, mass giveaways. Neighborhoods really demonstrated the power of resiliency. Instrumental to the social recovery and health of our cities lies the neighborhood. And key to putting neighborhoods back at the center of healthy city development are community partnerships. Over 17 years, we have been centering our work in community with community. You will hear more about that in a few minutes from our partners. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Shannon, to introduce the next section of the webinar.
Great, thank you so much, Amanda. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Now that you know a little bit more about who we are The Diagnostic is a service that leverages our 17 years of community engagement and city development experience. And we believe that by putting people at the foundation of neighborhoods, we can build strong and great cities. The word diagnostic here is, of course, implying that we are identifying or diagnosing a particular problem or issue. And using an asset-based approach, 880 Cities will offer you not only the ability to collect data and identify problems, but to analyze and actualize that data into real-world change. We work with communities to translate what we've learned into recommendations and actions that improve social connection and physical activity for people of all ages in public space. So we are acting as the researcher, urban planner, and community liaison all in one. The Diagnostic is a practical tool designed for community and for municipal decision makers, and it gives people the data they need on the performance of their neighborhood and public spaces. The findings of the Diagnostic are designed to offer evidence-based recommendations for public space. So the methodology is underpinned by 3 880 Cities guiding principles. The right to public space, which means every resident has the right to access high quality and dynamic public space. The right to mobility, meaning every resident has the right to safe, accessible, and comfortable sidewalks, bike lanes, and public transit. And of course, the right to participate, meaning that every resident has the right to participate in the city building process. The Neighborhood Diagnostic Service uses 4 main assessment tools: public space audits, stationary mapping, intercept surveys, and checklists to research and define what it is we're looking at. In the interest of time, I'm not going to delve into the specifics of each of these tools, except to say that they're all our data collection methods to understand how, when, and why people are or are not using public spaces. And our full kit, our diagnostic toolkit, is going to be available next week for download on our website. So you can explore all of these tools and how they work in detail, and we definitely encourage you to do that. At the end of our diagnostic process, we will deliver a diagnostic assessment informed through participatory approaches that leverage data and community experience to guide future investments, priorities, and planning. So the assessment is the how of what we do, and then we deliver the what. And the what is really in these activations that our partners are going to share with us later on in the presentation. Basically, what we are offering is that we would create public space activation proposals which connect residents, streets, and parks to reflect the value of the community. Every proposal we deliver is unique, and it's guided by what we're hearing from your community and what we're observing in your community. This process, again, is guided by the idea that great public spaces that foster social connection and build healthy neighborhoods build great cities. What's important to keep in mind about this entire process, and as we talk through some of these examples, is that it really is an iterative process, and it's a process of gradual improvement. So as we are working with your community and learning what matters to your stakeholders, we are feeding that information back into our testing activations to measure community response. So at the end of this engagement process, we can deliver a report that truly represents what your community wants. So before I introduce our wonderful partners and all of their fantastic projects, I'm going to quickly turn it over to our in-house data wizard, Brandon, and he's going to share with you very quickly what all of this raw data looks like before we turn it into these beautiful community space activations. Brandon?
Perfect. Thank you, Shannon. So yeah, my name is Brandon, and I'm a project coordinator for 880 Cities. And I work on the data analysis side. So before, when we do our spaces and we work with our partners, we seek to identify underutilized spaces in their community, and we go forward to assess them with some key tools from our diagnostic toolkit. With the help of many volunteers and dedicated staff, we move forward to collect different forms of data at various times of day to get a holistic picture of what is happening in the spaces we assess. So this data is integrated in our data management systems and are aggregated and cleaned up into more usable, impactful findings. From there, this is where the magic happens. We seek to make data engaging, accessible, and fun for all, where communities of all sizes and shapes can understand what's going on in their own communities. We create these graphs, we create the images, and we create the final reports for our clientele to to help give key recommendations on what the communities want in their space. But between the collection process and the end product, we do a series of pilots, which will be discussed further in the next section here. And I'll pass it over. Shannon?
Thanks, Brandon. Great. So now I'd like to introduce you to 3 of our partners from Brampton, Kitchener, and Mississauga. We're going to discuss each of their projects and what this process brought to their communities. The first project we're going to meet with is Brampton, and the project was called Activate Downtown Brampton. This project was a collaborative project between 880 cities, the City of Brampton, and the Downtown Brampton Business Improvement Area, and it was funded by Government of Canada through the Main Street Community Activator Program. Activate Downtown Brampton was a series of interactive installations and activations that took place in downtown Brampton's laneways and public gathering spaces from May to October 2022. So what you are looking at are the before and after photos of this Brampton project. And I'm now going to introduce Susie Godfroy, who's the Executive Director of the Downtown Brampton BIA, and she's going to speak more about this project.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. And I just wanted to say hello to everybody. And it's I'm so happy to be here today. I did want to say our Activate Downtown Brampton project. I will preface by saying we were working on a number of reinvigorations and reimagining our downtown prior to COVID. So we had been working with TMU, or formerly known as Ryerson University, and their planning students on different studio projects on different interventions that we could do. And so we did do a few applications for grants, and we did start our Activate program informally back in 2021. And then we teamed up with the City of Brampton and Amanda and her team at 880 Cities with regards to Activate Downtown, and we collaborated on a grant to transform Vivian Lane and also bring more life and more vibrancy to the downtown core from a street sense. So you know, ensuring that we have a number of public spaces in our downtown. We've got Daily Times Square, Ken Willen Square, Garden Square, Vivian Lane, McCarter Lane. I mean, we've got a lot of laneways and we've got lots of squares. And so when we met up with Amanda and her team to work together on this project, this was super exciting. And so it was truly an incredible partnership. And we really, you know, we've seen so many benefits from this program. So we did apply together for the grant, and the BIA's role, we were looking at activating some of the public, and I should say private, some of our patios in the downtown with live music. So we hosted 23 weeks of live music in a number of those squares I noted, as well as working on the physical transformation of Vivian Lane. And this was such an amazing project because we really truly worked with the community, and we worked with a local artist who did this beautiful ground mural on Vivian Lane, and in the summertime we had about 20 or 30 different volunteers helping Abiola paint that laneway, and then we brought in additional patio furniture, plants, just simple things like sandboxes for parents to bring their kids to have fun in the afternoon. And then we started to program Vivian Lane with a number of community activations in the daytime, as well as markets in the evening. And so we had a lot of fun. And I think the big part for me was just bringing the community together to do the programming. It wasn't the BIA or the city doing this, that we had a steering committee that we worked with, and we had a great sounding board to really connect with our very, very culturally diverse and rich community and the whole city of Brampton. And so, you know, the success of Vivian Lane and the beautiful, bright, colorful mural has really increased the foot traffic of the area. It's also increased safety, in a sense of feeling safe in our downtown, because there are certain areas where we do have other activations that we're working on to achieve these very results. And I think for us, the other part was the musical activations and programming. So, and I did want to highlight a big part of this was Amanda's team and all of the work that they did with the public life studies, intercept surveys, community engagement. So we really knew what we were working on and what was working and what wasn't working. I did want to also note that we're still working on Activate Downtown Brampton because we were very lucky in additional grants. So we've got a 3-year grant with Canadian Healthy Communities that we're going to be continuing Activate Downtown this year and in 2024. So we're currently looking at activating our streets again with live music and additional laneway transformations just across from Vivian Lane. And then I do want to say the collaboration with the city and 880s was incredible, but the big part of the success of this for those on today's call is building that community capital, building connections with so many different community providers, bringing them to the table and breaking down barriers. So simple barriers could be renting out a laneway or getting the appropriate insurance. So the BIA and the city and 880s all worked out all of those details. And we brought in a lot of different community organizations who brought in their volunteers from chess tournaments to the Alzheimer's Society to health marketplaces. So it was really truly a grassroots approach to programming. And I think the big thing about when you're building your downtown or in any public space or neighborhood is you really want to be relevant to the people that you are serving and ensuring that they're at the table and empowering what they're working on. So I'm honored to be here today and happy to take any questions, but we were really, really happy with the results from our Activate Downtown program last year and looking forward for future programs for this year and many years to follow.
Thank you so much, Susie, and we are very happy to have you here with us today. And it's always so nice to hear how projects, develop a life of their own and continue on even after the first kind of activation and trial run. So that's wonderful. Thank you. I'm now going to go to Kitchener, Ontario. I would like to introduce the Kitchener Pop-Up Park. So here you're looking at King Street in Kitchener. And this is the before photo. In the fall, 880 cities and the city of Kitchener came together to launch the first ever pop-up park in downtown Kitchener. So what is a pop-up park? The pop-up park was not permanent. It was a park designed to build excitement and engage diverse communities in reimagining parks and public spaces from an equity lens. The pop-up tested ideas generated by residents and demonstrated that quick action can be taken to show residents and equity-deserving community groups that the city is listening and taking action on what they say. And it also demonstrates the value of pedestrian-focused spaces. So in this photo, which you're looking at now, that is the after photo of the same corner. And here you can see the activation. We've completely transformed what is actually a road, and the pop-up has led to some exciting developments, which I'm going to let our partner, AJ Wisniewski, speak about. She's the manager of parks and open space design and development. So over to you, AJ.
Much, Shannon. And thank you everyone for being here today. Like Shannon said, my name is AJ Wisniewski, and I am the manager of Parks and Open Space Design and Development here at the City of Kitchener. So for a weekend in October, we closed down one of our main arterial roads in downtown Kitchener, King Street, right in front of City Hall, and we created a pop-up park. This park was, this really started as an engagement opportunity for our park strategic plan. It was an opportunity to connect with community members. It was an opportunity to have a demonstration of what we had been hearing, a real-time demonstration of some of the things that we had been hearing through our engagement, and to show community, one, that we were listening into what these spaces could look like. So we worked with a few different community organizations and partners to not only program the space, but to co-create the space. So we held various engagement meetings to see, what kind of activities people wanted to have in this space. Through the design process, which was very collaborative, we ended up having a natural playground, a accessible swing, some more like nature-based play, such as like large sticks and stumps that kids could play with and have interpretive play. We also had a sacred fire and a prayer space, as well as a food forest. So those are all things we had heard from community that they would like to see kind of in our park spaces and what they were looking for from park spaces. So it's really exciting to be able to create the space with them and to have it in such a unique location. Kitchener is, I'd assume, very much like any other city that has seen a lot of intensification. It is lacking green space in our downtown. So this was really an opportunity to re-envision what public spaces could look like. So the image on the screen right now is an aerial kind of what the design of the space was. And then throughout the weekend, we had different programming. So we worked with Muslims in public spaces to have a Friday Islamic prayer space, as well as collaborating on a community art mural, which you can kind of see on the sidewalk there. That was a fun activity with a bunch of different schools that came out and helped us paint and decorate the walkways. Like I mentioned, we had a sacred fire space. So we had an elder there having conversations and teachings. We also screened community-driven film projects. So we worked with a local grassroots organization, Land Back Camp, to screen some of their films. And we also hosted conversations about houselessness in parks to discuss kind of how houselessness is impacting park spaces and what we can do to support all members of our community. So through this process, we found really great value in that collaborative approach. So it was really great for relationship building and for also creating equitable spaces. About a year prior to this pop-up, Carlsberg Square, which is right in front of City Hall, had went through a major renovation. With the pop-up park here, we saw over a 400% increase in people using that space and lingering in space. So it's not only, a great way to activate, and it also just drew people to the downtown, which was really exciting. From this project, we've already had more calls for spaces like this in our downtown, and calls to start thinking of our public spaces, such as like roadways and sidewalks, in different ways to see how they can actually serve the greater needs of community. So this summer, we're actually inspired by this, we're closing down a road and creating a play space and seating area in one of our roadways. That was a direct result of this. So we've seen a really great impact in the downtown community and kind of throughout the city in terms of equitable design and relationship building. So that's pretty much my piece on downtown. So I'll throw it back over to Shannon.
So thank you so much, AJ. That was wonderful. Very exciting. I love this photo of this particular pop-up. You can really see the scale of it. So I'm going to now introduce our last partner for today, which is the School Streets program, funded by Green Communities Canada through the Ontario Active School Travel Program. Ontario School Streets Pilot was an initiative that tested the implementation of school streets programs in Ontario across 4 communities during the 2021-22 school year. If you don't know what school streets are programs that create a park-free environment in front of school at the start and the end of the school day to prioritize safe walking conditions for children, caregivers, teachers, and creating a safe and clean environment to foster active. School streets temporarily close the street in front of schools to cars and open them to people. So the photos that you are seeing in front of you are representations of before and after of this program. As you can see in the before shots, the road is either empty or it's full of cars. And in the after shots, you can see people are really making use of the space and enjoying the freedom of moving through the space. I'm going to now turn it over to Laura Zeglin, who's the Vision Zero program lead, and she will talk more about this program. Laura, over to you.
All right, thanks very much, Shannon. And following on your definition of school streets, I'd like to add that they also provide an opportunity for all of us to rethink what is normal. You know, this sort of idea that school drop-off and pickup times have to be chaotic, stressful places full of traffic congestion. School streets prove to us that they don't need to be that. So in May of 2022, the city of Mississauga launched its first ever school streets. And we did this at 2 different sites in Mississauga. So one was a quiet local road serving a public school, and the other was a slightly busier minor collector road serving a Catholic school and a public school that were just a couple hundred meters down the road from one another. So in the images that were shown, you can see the differences in the spaces before the school streets were implemented and after. But as you can probably surmise, there was a lot of work that went into getting from the before to the after. We couldn't just go in one day and shut down the street. So there were many decisions we had to make before we could move forward with this project, starting with who needs to be involved. So our team at the City of Mississauga convened a project advisory group, including staff from our local school boards and school bus transportation consortium, among others, to discuss considerations around getting buy-in from all the relevant stakeholders. We knew this was something very different that we were proposing, and we were going to need that lead up time to get people on board. We also talked about things like risk management, what kind of permissions we would need, and more generally, logistics. You know, how many schools should we work with for our pilot? How long should the pilot be? Should we do it for a week, for a month, for longer? Did the closure need to be supervised, and who would supervise it? Do we allow any cars in the closure area? What should we use for the barriers? So as you can see, the list of decisions to be made and the background research that we needed to do quickly became quite long. So having an advisory group to help work through these questions was extremely important. And then once we decided which schools we wanted to work with, and that in itself was an exercise in data collection, prioritizing schools based on specific metrics, we convened local project planning teams to plan what the pilot would look like at each location. So we didn't kind of go in already knowing exactly what it was going to look like. So we asked the local community teams, you know, should we do it both before and after school? Do you want there to be activities? If so, what should those activities be? Who else from the community do we need to bring in, and how do we best communicate with them? So from there, we were off and running. In the end, as I mentioned, we worked with 3 schools at 2 sites. Each of our closures ran for 3 weeks. So that was kind of the sweet spot that we decided on in the end, that was long enough to hopefully lead to some longer term behavior change, but not so long that we couldn't get people on board with the idea of trying this new thing. And at one of the sites, we only did it in the afternoon, and that was at the request of that local project planning team. They just felt that the challenges of also closing down the street during the morning drop-off was going to be too great. But at both sites, city staff and members of our advisory group were responsible for overseeing the permits for the road closure and the planning for how to minimize risk. Though, as it's since been pointed out to me, perhaps we need to reframe this language. School streets are actually much less risky than the usual congestion seen around school drop-offs and pickups. We're actually removing almost all of the risk by not letting the cars into that space. But the risk, I guess, is just because it's something unknown, right? People don't know what to expect. So in our pilot, school staff and students were responsible for the planning and implementation of activities in the closure areas. So I'd say that this is an optional component of a school street. It's not a necessary prerequisite that you are planning to do activities, but it definitely helps bring the streets to life. And also to bring attention, excitement, and positive conversation among the community members to what we were doing. So it wouldn't necessarily be sustainable if you were doing it as a permanent program to have activities every day. But because we were just doing it for the 3 weeks at each of the sites, we thought it was a really good way to, bring conversation to it. And it was the community members who really planned and executed those pieces. And I want to take a moment now to talk about that piece, the positive conversations that we saw happening around school streets. So for example, we had a mom who normally drove her children to school. She decided to park at a local community center nearby because she felt it was just a little too far to walk all the way from home with her young kids. And she loved it. She would wave a friendly hello to our volunteers each morning during the pilot and explained how nice it was to get this bit of exercise into her morning that she never had before when she just drove straight to the kiss and ride. So this is kind of that opportunity to rethink how she normally traveled. And she told us she was looking forward to continuing to do it after the pilot was finished because she liked that bit of exercise in her day and social interaction. And she doesn't know it, but after our pilot, we were doing our post-pilot active transportation counts. I did see her out walking from the community center, so she did keep it up. Then there are also the 50 plus high school students, volunteers who participated to hand out the after school snacks during the pilot at one of our locations. They were making new friendships with other students from other local high schools and even getting to have nice conversations with the appreciative parents as they were handing out the snacks. So that was another kind of cool piece of community members getting to interact who wouldn't normally have that opportunity. And then there was a father of a child with special needs. We had decided in our pilot that we were going to make some exceptions for some vehicles to go in the space, and they would be chaperoned by a volunteer walking with their car at a walking speed they had to drive. So this particular parent, he was one of our exemptions. He got a pass from the school, like, yes, your child has special needs, you can still drive to the school. But partway into the first week of the 3 weeks, we noticed that he and his child and their 3 dogs had started walking. So he actually made the decision to walk after all, as he wanted his son to get to experience being part of what was happening in the community. And that to me was really powerful, because I think a lot of times we don't want to move forward with things because we don't want to inconvenience people. People are not going to like it. But then we find that once we actually try it, people like the idea more than we think that they might. So that I was really happy to get to see that outcome from the pilot. And there's also some important context that I've left out. So as Shannon mentioned, the School Streets pilot project happened concurrently across 4 different Ontario municipalities, with Mississauga being one of them. And 880 cities provided resources and support to those pilot communities. So they helped us work through some of those early logistics questions that I mentioned at the beginning by providing examples of other successful school streets and how they had worked through those challenges. 880 also convened monthly meetings for our municipal teams, also bringing in other partners from other municipalities running school streets or who had run school streets in the past, as part of what ended up becoming this kind of community of practice where we could share ideas, brainstorm solutions to challenges that are specific to trying to do something that our municipalities had never done before, and essentially bringing us together to bond over our shared experiences. And to this day, now that most of our respective pilots have finished, we're continuing to keep in contact to discuss the next big step for this work, which is how to sustain school streets as long-term programming. Now that we don't have that initial funding, how are we going to keep it moving? So we're not there yet, but I look forward to being able to share where we get to with these conversations. Thanks very much, and back over to you, Shannon.
Thank you, Laura. That was a great overview of the project, and we also hope you get there, and I'm sure you will. So I would like to now ask all of our panelists to share their cameras and unmute themselves, and we will have a small discussion on all of these projects and the experience. My first question is, how did these projects aid with urban resilience and community resilience and vibrancy activities? I'm going to leave the floor open and, very much a conversation style.
I can start. So we found, this really did help with community resilience and really activation through a few different ways. And I think really that collaboration really showed the willingness for community to wanting to participate. Another piece of that resilience was also, we did this project in 2022. So kind of, I know we're still currently within the pandemic, but kind of at the end of those lockdowns. So people were very excited to be in space and to be exploring something new. So I think this really gave an opportunity for communities to come together after being separated for so long and to kind of explore, what they learned over the pandemic, know how certain things and certain importances had changed to them, right? And again, having really focusing on equity and inviting people to the table who traditionally may not have been invited or had been excluded or didn't feel welcomed, making sure everyone felt welcome and was invited to participate, I think really created a sense of community and some more buy-in into these types of new and innovative projects that we may not have seen in the past. So I think that was really, that kind of led, I think that was one of the biggest things that led to the success of this space, was just the community willingness and participation. So yeah, no, it was really exciting.
Yeah, I can jump in next. Yeah, definitely. Even though ours, similar to yours, was technically, I guess, after kind of the thick of the pandemic and we weren't in a lockdown, it was really nice to have an opportunity for people to get to come together, right? And it was outdoors, so it felt a bit safer. But yeah, I spoke to this somewhat during my presentation, around the interactions that we had with community members. I think that there was, like, I don't have data on this, but presumably that experience of getting to kind of share this experience together, of getting to walk down the middle of the road when you don't normally get to do that, of getting to have like activities happening on the street in front of your school, doing this together, I think, presumably helps build healthy communities because people get to experience it together on a community level. Another thing that I think helped contribute to neighborhood resilience was our process of local project planning teams that we brought together to plan what the pilots would look like in our community. So I kind of glossed over this in my presentation, but we spent time like kind of curating these local project planning teams with hopes that we would have representation from across the community, not just kind of the usual suspects who normally might show up to a community meeting. We wanted to reach out to the kind of harder to reach people, like parents of young kids, newcomers, people who work at organizations that support marginalized members of the community, recognizing that those members might not have the time to come out to a meeting, but they could be represented in the meeting. And we brought these groups together to plan around this specific thing, but at the same time, the connections that were being made for community members to connect in the future over other ideas were being made. So I think this project was a really great opportunity for that.
And I'll jump in. I wanted to say, sorry guys, my office Wi-Fi went down, so I'm back on track. But I did want to say with our project, we were already going through challenges pre-COVID, and so when we started on this Activate idea and interventions in the downtown, and then COVID hit, and then it was like everybody, it was horrific for the downtown business community and also the downtown neighborhood and our residents. So having this Activate program really reconnected our everybody together, whether you're a business owner, landlord, resident, city office workers, or professional office workers. But it was really good in building the resiliency of a downtown. And I always like to say our downtown is a community. It's so and I found with the COVID Activate Downtown, it gave us a great opportunity to reach out to people we hadn't seen in a few years, but also to be building on more of an equitable downtown. And downtowns today all over the world is not just for one particular sector of society. Downtowns are for everyone. And so I learned a lot, our whole team learned a lot, and I'm really thankful for all the expertise that Amanda and Gia and the whole 880s team brought to us. And it really helped us think outside of the box. And, again, building partnerships is easy, but building really true partnerships when people trust each other, like the big word is trust, and empowering our communities to be part of the downtown. So you can have a beautiful, pretty downtown, but is it really authentic and connected to the community and meeting the needs of people and having that open dialogue? So it certainly is something that we all learned a lot, and we're going to be continuing on this on different recommendations that have been put forth through our whole team, and I'm really, listening to everybody else. I think we're all in the same boat here. And I think the word equity, equitable communities, and understanding our diversity and celebrating it together so that we all feel welcome in our public spaces. And essentially, there's so much opportunity when you work with community and their programming spaces. So I just wanted to jump in to say that.
Thank you so much, Susie. I mean, I think all three of you have touched on, let's make sure you all can hear me. You've all touched on so much of what we believe and focus on here at 880 Cities, whether or not it's the equity lens or meeting people where they are, as you talked about, Laura, like really showing up to spaces that we can get feedback where people are. One of our rules of engagement is that we meet people where they are, and we're not asking people to come to the 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. town hall when they're picking up kids and they can't engage. Like, we really do believe that people have the right to participate, and we try to create as many spaces for that participation. And if we can't create the space, we go to the communities. Like, we're not asking them to come to us to give their feedback. So I think that was a really important point that you touched on, as well as trust, connection, and equity. Like, I do believe that those are all such integral parts to city building. And Susie, as you spoke about, downtowns have been changing, I think, for a long time. I think the pandemic accelerated some of that change, and we are seeing downtowns being used very differently. Of course, I think many municipalities across Ontario are seeing a lot more housing in the downtown, and so a lot more children in the downtown. And what does that mean and look like? So all of this is very relevant to what we talk about every day here at 880 Cities. And I just think that coming out of the pandemic, there's so much that we can sort of take away at the neighborhood scale, like really good things that came out of the pandemic and good things that we were able to implement. So you've all in some way touched on those things. So just thank you so much for that. And it really is a pleasure to work with people who are so aligned, I guess, in our methods and visions. My next question to the three of you, as we are here talking about data, how did data support the successful rollout of your projects? Can you speak more to that? And I'll open it up again, discussions now.
I can go first this time. So data was important. I touched on this during my talk in terms of selecting which schools we were going to work with. We didn't want to just kind of work with any schools in the city. We didn't just want to work with the ones that would be the easiest, who are already doing a ton of stuff, because we wanted to see to really test the concept of a school street. Is this something that could be scaled to places that aren't already necessarily really in tune to doing active school travel related work? So we had looked carefully at metrics like the number of students that lived within walking distance of the school, the number of students who were bused. So we wanted to make sure that they would have a reasonable chance of actually being able to walk to school during the pilot, if that's what we wanted to promote. And we looked at the connectivity of the road networks. We wanted to make sure it wasn't on a bus route, so that we were going to have to divert a lot of other traffic. And we also had an equity lens that we applied. There's different city and community held data, but what we chose to focus on was the Peel District School Board has something called the Socioeconomic Vulnerability Index that kind of ranks their different schools across the board. So we decided to use that to work with kind of the higher needs schools, because we realized that the actual street where the school is, we found that a lot of the streets where the schools were slightly more affluent, but then the who was filtering into the school didn't necessarily always reflect what the street in front of the school was. So we thought that was a better metric. But then beyond just choosing the schools, we obviously, we wanted to measure whether the pilot was successful. So our key objectives that we had set for ourselves together with 880, they helped us kind of draw these up. Our key objectives were to increase awareness of active transportation, to increase the actual rates of active transportation, to reduce the rates of driving to school, and to demonstrate community buy-in and support for the idea. So I'm happy to report that we were successful on all of these fronts. The reduction in rates of driving to school was especially exciting to see. And to do this, we performed traffic counts at multiple locations around the school neighborhoods to account for all the alternate drop-off and pickup locations that drivers might go to instead because the road in front of the school was closed. And at one of the locations that we did the morning and the afternoon closures, there was actually a 38% reduction in the number of cars during the morning pickup. So that was across all sites. It was over 90% right in front of the school. And at both of the sites, there was an observed 41% increase in rates of active transportation, which was really cool to see. So besides this kind of feel-good factor of the school streets, we found that they're also an effective tool for addressing this much needed culture change around school travel. That school drop-off and pickup doesn't have to mean traffic congestion and stress, that it can actually be a safe and enjoyable experience. So the data collection was a really important part of that, so we can actually demonstrate it with some numbers and not just pictures of people playing in the street, even though those are cool too.
AJ or Susie, did you want to speak at all to the data element of your project?
Sure. So I know, like, for our project, we kind of had some data going into this of saying, like, this is what we've heard from communities. These are, communities that we haven't heard from. This is the type of programming that we're seeing is kind of missing. So we kind of had a base to go off there. But I think the data that was really valuable that was collected through this was, well, kind of twofold, where it was the soft data of like connection, how people use the space, but also that hard data of like, how many people were in this space? How long did they stay here? Visits to downtown businesses, did they increase? Did they decrease? Things like that. And we saw, overwhelmingly that people this created more of a draw to the downtown, and that people were spending more time outside within this space. So from that data, it was successful, and we kind of use that as a basis to show the future successes. So I had mentioned kind of earlier about us closing down an adjacent street and doing a play piece. That wouldn't have been made possible without that data that was kind of collected through that pop-up park. The numbers that we saw of people using the space, lingering in the space, interacting in the space, meeting new community members or community partners, was really valuable in us justifying closing down part of a road permanently to create more of these opportunities for connection and for play within the downtown. So I think data played a really big role in the creating of the success of this into like those after effects. So.
Okay, and then I'm going to jump in, and I know we learned a lot through the data that we collected. We started off with some lifestyle studies through engaging with our community at large. We've got a really amazing farmers market in downtown Brampton, and it's every Saturday. It's massive. So we did some outreach with 880s in the city of Brampton on asking the community what they would like to see in the downtown from a programming perspective, whether that's live music, art activations, family events, and even just information. So we had a lot of community organizations come to the table to do pop-up activations, letting the public know about XYZ health service in the Brampton community, and helping people understand things like Alzheimer's if you've got a parent that you're different health issues that we all are dealing with. We also knew through the data that we collected that we saw an incredible change and just the day-to-day activity of Vivian Lane as a walk-through lane. And laneways in general, like at one point they used to be roads, and then they became laneways that were, cordoned off as little public places. But sometimes laneways are literally walk-throughs. So through the data that we collected, we saw a dramatic change where people were actually hanging out, going there for lunch, having coffees, having meetings, bringing their, beautiful weather in the summertime. Younger kids really loved the whole. They became Instagram opportunities for kids and photo op backdrops. So when you're doing a transformation of a space in your downtown or neighborhood that's not so nice, it's amazing, all of the benefits and the healthy communities perspective, getting people outdoors and in the neighborhood, like local residents just going for a coffee or hanging out, seniors, it becoming their place to meet. What we also learned was with the transformation of Vivian Lane, there was an increased feeling of safety and comfort, socialness and playfulness. So again, making the downtown more relevant to everybody that lives in the area, not just consumers coming on a destination. So yeah, we certainly will be. We also learned, and I keep on failing to mention this, the musical activations that we did 23 weeks, and we featured over 280 musicians, all local. And I think we all forgot, and maybe we still forget these things, like going through the pandemic, a lot of the creative class of all over the world, the musicians were severely affected. So having this opportunity to give them that opportunity, and it was local Brampton. So again, we brought culturally relevant programming to our spaces. So again, you could spend millions of dollars on an artist, but we were really you know, organic and very local, and I know that brought families and you know, lots of new foot traffic to the downtown core, and again put a lot of smiles on everybody's faces.
Thank you, Susie, so much for that. And again, I agree with you. I mean, we take an asset-based approach here, and like you just said, we look for what assets exist in your community and how can we leverage what you already have, because I think all of these communities that we're speaking about and all of the communities that are joining us for this webinar today, there's incredible assets within your community and we can tap into them. And so I think that's a great example, especially coming out of the pandemic, of a way to sort of leverage some of those assets. So I just want to make sure, in the interest of time, that we leave a little bit of time for Q&As. So I did have a last question, which is, you know, what have you all learned? But I think we've spoken to those learnings. So I'm just going to say, for our guests joining us today, the next steps, if you're interested in, you know, exploring what any of these activations could look like in your community, then you know, keep your eyes open for the launch of the service, which will be next week on March 31st. So you can find it on our website, 880cities.org. You can contact us for a brainstorming session where we'd happily go through with you what it is you're looking for and ways that we can facilitate that. And again, you can find links on our website, or log in to join our newsletter and follow up with us. We're happy to connect. So I think at this time, we'd like to thank our panelists for their time in sharing their projects. Again, everything we do at 880 Cities is from a partnership perspective. So nothing that we are doing would be possible without wonderful partners. So thank you all again for joining us. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to share them in the chat. Thank you all.